Why did no one look at her when she took her seat? The briefing room was already full when she arrived. Chairs scraped, tablets glowed, voices overlapped in that low, confident way people speak when they believe they belong. She paused at the edge of the room, scanning for her name, her place. Nothing. No rank insignia on her chest, no escort, just a plain uniform and a folded jacket under her arm. Someone laughed softly as she passed, not cruelly, worse. Casually, as if she were furniture. She chose the last empty chair, not at the table, against the wall. The room smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee. The mission map hovered in the center, rotating slowly, its blue glow reflecting in polished boots and hardened faces. This was a high-priority operation. Everyone here knew it. That's why the silence shifted when the commanding officer entered. Colonel Harris didn't look at her either. He didn't need to. His eyes moved over ranks, over medals, over familiarity. He spoke to those he recognized. His voice filled the room like it was designed to. Confident, loud, certain. She listened. She always listened first. As the briefing continued, she noticed the gaps. Not mistakes, assumptions. Timelines that leaned too heavily on best-case scenarios. Enemy behavior predicted by doctrine instead of pattern. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the urge to speak, the older urge to stay silent. Years ago, she had learned what happened when she spoke too early. Her fingers pressed into her knee. Breathe, observe. Then Harris stopped mid-sentence. "Who's that?" Every head turned. He was pointing at her. Not with curiosity, with irritation. "You," he said, "did you take a wrong room?" A ripple of suppressed amusement moved through the officers. Someone coughed. Someone else smirked. She stood slowly, calmly. "No, sir." "What's your unit?" "I'm attached to the operation." Harris frowned. "Attached how?" Silence stretched. She felt it again, the old sensation. Being underestimated didn't hurt anymore. It focused her, like pressure turning carbon into something harder. He stepped closer, looked her up and down. "No insignia," he said. "No patch, no clearance marker, so I'll ask again. Who are you?" She met his eyes. "My role here isn't dependent on rank." The laughter came this time, louder. Harris smiled, sharp and thin. "Everything in this room depends on rank." She nodded once. "So I've noticed." That was when the mission timer on the wall flickered. Just once. No one else saw it. But she did. And she knew. Not yet, she told herself. Let it come. What did she see that the rest of them missed? The operation launched on schedule. Aircraft lifted into the dark, screens filled with telemetry. The command center hummed with motion, confidence tightening into routine. She stood behind the analysts now. No one told her to move. No one stopped her either. She watched the data scroll past, her eyes catching patterns where others saw noise. Small deviations, timing irregularities, a signal that didn't belong. Her heartbeat slowed. There it is. She leaned closer to the screen. The enemy network traffic wasn't aggressive. It was patient, listening, learning. That's when the first system alert sounded. Then another. Then 5 at once. Voices rose, chairs moved, orders overlapped. What's failing? Comms lag on channel 3. Navigation glitch resetting. Harris took control the only way he knew how. Louder commands, faster decisions, standard protocols executed with confidence. She watched those commands feed the problem. Her mouth opened, then closed. Not yet. The room began to tilt, not physically but emotionally. Confidence cracked, sweat appeared, someone swore under their breath. Then the lights dimmed. Emergency power kicked in. That did it. She stepped forward. Stop resetting the network. Harris turned, eyes blazing. Who authorized you to speak? If you reboot again, you'll accelerate the failure. Security. This isn't a glitch, she said louder now, still calm. It's adaptive. That word landed differently. The room quieted just enough. She pointed to the screen. You're fighting it like malware. It is. It's parasitic. Every standard response strengthens it. Harris hesitated. That half-second saved them. What do you suggest? Someone asked, not Harris, one of the pilots. She inhaled. We starve it. Her hands moved. Commands flowed, not fast, precise. She rerouted power, induced instability, broke symmetry. The system groaned. Metal complained. People grabbed consoles to steady themselves. Harris watched, torn between rage and relief. What is your rank? He demanded. Because you don't get to do this without one. She didn't look at him. Right now, she said, high enough. The enemy signal faltered. She felt a flicker of pride. Then the real resistance began. Why did her voice never shake, until it almost did? The counterattack came from inside the system. Clever, desperate. It targeted life support next. A warning screamed across the monitors. Decks losing oxygen. Panic surged. She froze. Just for a breath. Not fear, memory. Another room, another crisis, another commander who hadn't listened. Bodies floating where air used to be. The weight of that failure still lived behind her ribs. Not again. She forced herself forward. Vent the auxiliary coolant. That'll cripple us, Harris snapped. It'll disrupt the parasite's core logic. And if you're wrong. She finally turned to him. Then I'll carry that. Her eyes didn't challenge him, they invited him. Harris swallowed. Do it. The station shuddered. A high-pitched resonance filled the air. On the screens, red patterns collapsed. The enemy recoiled. Hope flickered. She didn't smile. It's not over, she said quietly. It never is. Her hands moved faster now, not frantic, focused. She was in that place where noise faded and only the problem remained. She built a question into the system, an impossible one, a logic knot with no solution. Transmit, she said. The signal went out. Then, stillness. The parasite froze. That's it, someone whispered. No, she replied. Now comes the hard part. She prepared the final command, the one no regulation would approve, the one that would save them. Harris stared at the screen. You're ejecting the control module. Yes. We'll be blind. We'll be alive. Silence. Then he nodded. When the module tore free, the room went quiet in a way that felt sacred. Systems stabilized. Alarms died. Breathing returned. She exhaled. For the first time, her hands trembled. Just slightly. Why did the room fall silent when the Admiral asked her name? The call came minutes later. Fleet Command, Admiral on the line. Harris stepped forward, already rehearsing his explanation. She stopped him with a look. Not dominance. Certainty. She spoke into the channel. Report delivered, situation contained, crew safe. The Admiral listened, asked questions, reviewed logs. Time stretched. Then, for the record, the Admiral said, what is your rank? The room leaned in. She straightened. In this operational context, she said, my authority superseded local command. And that authority came from. She met the camera. Fleet strategic mandate. A pause. Rank, the Admiral pressed. She didn't raise her voice. 4-star General. The laughter never came. It couldn't. The Admiral acknowledged her, confirmed it, assigned her temporary command. Harris stepped back like the floor had shifted beneath him. She felt no triumph. Only release. Why did she leave without ceremony? She stayed long enough to ensure stability, long enough to teach without lecturing, to correct without humiliating. Then she packed her jacket. No medals, no speeches. As she walked out, a junior officer placed a cup of coffee on the table beside her. She nodded. That was enough. What does real authority sound like when it finally speaks? It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It acts when it must. And sometimes, dignity doesn't announce itself at all. It simply ends the laughter. Why did the room feel colder the moment she touched the console? No one could quite explain it later. Some would say it was the lights dimming as secondary systems spun up. Others would blame the silence that followed her first command, that unnatural pause where trained professionals stopped talking and simply watched. But for the lieutenant nearest the wall, it felt like something else entirely, like the air itself had decided to pay attention. She didn't rush. That was the first thing that unsettled them. In a crisis, people hurried, fingers flew, voices sharpened. Authority usually arrived wrapped in urgency, but she leaned in slowly, eyes tracking the cascading data as if it were familiar terrain. Her hands hovered just above the surface, not touching yet, listening, waiting. The screens told a story. Most of them weren't trained to read. Latency spikes appeared in places that shouldn't matter. Minor power fluctuations synchronized across unrelated subsystems. Comms interference that corrected itself just before triggering alarms. To the untrained eye, it looked like noise, random, irritating, manageable. To her, it was breathing. A system inhaling, exhaling, testing its boundaries. Who authorized you to access that terminal? Colonel Harris demanded, stepping closer. His voice carried authority, but there was a crack in it now, a hairline fracture. She didn't answer immediately, not out of defiance, out of necessity. If you isolate the network, she said softly, you'll corner it. And that's bad because it's already cornered, she replied, and it's learning what frightens you. That word again. Learning. The room shifted. Analysts exchanged glances. One of them frowned at his own display, suddenly unsure of what he was seeing. Harris crossed his arms. You're telling me our systems are under attack by something that thinks. I'm telling you it reacts, she said, and reaction implies preference. She finally placed her fingers on the console. The effect was immediate. Data reorganized, not because she forced it, but because she asked the right questions. She rerouted feeds, layered diagnostics over live telemetry, stripped away the comforting summaries and exposed the raw behavior underneath. Patterns emerged. Not clean, not elegant. Hungry. Her jaw tightened. She had seen this before. Not here, not now, but years ago in another command center, watching another confident officer dismiss a warning because it didn't fit doctrine. That memory rose uninvited. The smell of scorched insulation, the way the alarms had overlapped until they blurred into a single, endless scream. She swallowed. Stay present. Colonel, she said, still not looking at him. Your last 3 commands increased its access by 12%. That's impossible. It isn't, she said. You're feeding it predictability. Harris laughed once, sharp, defensive. You expect me to hand over my command to someone who won't even tell me her rank. That did it. Not because of the insult, because of the timing. The system spiked again, harder this time. Lights flickered, someone cursed as a display went dark. She straightened slowly and turned to face him. I didn't come here to take your command, she said. I came here because if I didn't, you'd lose it. Silence. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The lieutenant by the wall felt his pulse in his throat. He realized dimly that he was holding his breath. Harris stared at her, measuring, recalibrating. For the first time, he looked less like a commander and more like a man standing at the edge of a map. "What do you need?" he asked. It wasn't surrender, but it was close. "I need you to stop trying to win," she said, "and start trying to survive." She turned back to the console before he could respond. "Kill the automated countermeasures," she ordered. "That leaves us exposed," an analyst protested. "Yes," she said, "that's the point." She could feel it now. Resistance building inside the system, not aggressive but confused, like a predator suddenly deprived of the signals it used to track prey. She induced instability next, small at first, a deliberate imbalance in the power grid. The station groaned, a deep metallic sound that vibrated through their boots. Several officers grabbed the edges of their stations. "Easy," she murmured, not to them, to the system. She watched how it responded, where it pulled resources from, which subsystems it abandoned to protect others. "There. Life support," she said. "It values that most." Harris stiffened. "That's where our people are." "And that's why it's hiding there," she replied. "It knows you won't strike it." A hard truth settled over the room. She hesitated. This was the moment she hated most, the place where logic and consequence collided, where saving the system meant risking lives, briefly, precisely, terrifyingly. Her chest tightened. "You promised," a voice whispered from memory, "never again." She closed her eyes for half a second. Then she acted. "Vent auxiliary coolant," she said. The engineer at the far console went pale. "That could disrupt the thermal regulators long enough to flush it out," she finished. "I know. And if it does, then I'll own that," she said quietly. The engineer looked to Harris. Harris looked at her. In that moment command passed without ceremony, without words. He nodded. "Do it." The station shuddered violently as coolant vented into space. A high-frequency vibration rippled through the deck. Somewhere deep within the structure, metal screamed. On the screens, red indicators flared, then flickered. She leaned closer. "Come on," she whispered. The system reacted exactly as she'd predicted. It recoiled from the instability, retreating deeper into the architecture, toward the core. A risky move. A desperate one. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's cornering itself," she said, "which means it's afraid." "Can systems feel fear?" someone asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and removed a small, unmarked data chip. Old, scarred, almost obsolete. The lieutenant noticed her hand linger on it for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Memory again. This station has an emergency broadcast array," she said. "Hardwired, independent." "Yes," the comms officer replied, "but it's jammed." "Not completely," she said, "just drowned." She handed him the chip. "What's on it?" he asked. "A question," she said. He blinked. "That's it." "That's enough." As he slotted the chip into his console, she watched the system's behavior tighten. The red pattern slowed, hesitated. "Transmit on a narrowband carrier," she instructed. Simple, unadorned. The pulse went out. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, stillness. The system froze mid-adaptation, caught in the act of becoming something else. A collective breath left the room. She didn't relax. "Now," she said, fingers already moving, "before it finds another way to think." She built the solution in real time, isolating the infected control pathways, wrapping them in containment code designed not to fight, but to lock. Her shoulders ached. Sweat traced a line down her spine. This was the part that cost her, the part no one ever saw. The weight of consequence. "Primary control module isolated," the engineer said, voice shaking. She nodded. "Prepare for ejection." Harris stared at the display. "We'll be dead in the water." "We'll be alive," she corrected. "There's a difference." The countdown began. In those final seconds, doubt crept in, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet question at the back of her mind. What if I'm wrong this time? She pushed it aside. The module detached with a violent jolt, tearing free into the void. The screens cleared. Alarms fell silent. Systems went dark, then stabilized. The station lived. For a long moment, no one spoke. She exhaled slowly, the tension draining from her hands. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was relief. And beneath that, something fragile. Hope. Because for the first time in a long while, she had spoken when it mattered. And they had listened. Why did her hand stop shaking the moment the alarms went silent? No one noticed it at first, not the engineers staring at their newly calm screens, not the analysts blinking as if waking from a bad dream. But the lieutenant did. He saw the way her fingers, tense and pale moments earlier, relaxed against the edge of the console. He saw the slow, controlled breath she took, as if she'd been holding it for far longer than the rest of them. The crisis was over. But whatever lived inside her was. Emergency power hummed beneath their feet, a steady reminder of how close they'd come to vanishing. Systems rebooted in cautious stages. Green indicators returned like fragile promises. Around her, voices resumed, quieter now, stripped of bravado. She stayed where she was, watching. Not because she distrusted the crew, because she didn't trust relief. Relief made people careless. Life support stable, an engineer reported. Navigation locked in passive, another added. Harris stood near the center of the room, arms at his sides, staring at the main display like it might accuse him of something. His posture had changed. Not slumped, just emptied, authority drained of certainty. He turned toward her. "Is it gone?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. The red signatures had vanished, yes. The hostile patterns were gone, but absence didn't always mean safety. Sometimes it just meant silence. "It's contained," she said carefully, "ejected with the control module." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes. "No," she said, "I don't think things like that are ever truly gone." The lieutenant felt a chill at her words. Harris nodded once, as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. "What happens now?" She looked around the room, at the people, at the damage they'd almost ignored, at the fragile balance they'd restored through a combination of courage and chance. "Now," she said, "we wait to see who notices." That answer unsettled them more than any alarm. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The station drifted in controlled silence, a patient recovering from surgery. Reports continued to trickle in: structural stress within acceptable limits, power reserves holding, no sign of residual intrusion. Somewhere in that quiet, tension began to seep back in, not panic but expectation. The call came without warning. An encrypted channel forced its way onto the main display. Fleet Command authentication codes scrolled faster than the eye could track. The room snapped to attention. Harris straightened instinctively, muscle memory overriding uncertainty. He took 2 steps toward the comms console, already preparing his voice. She spoke before he could. "Patch it through." It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It simply belonged. Harris stopped. The lieutenant felt it again, that subtle shift, like gravity had realigned itself. The screen resolved into the face of an older man. Steel-gray hair, deep lines carved by decades of decisions that couldn't be undone. Admiral Kincaid, Fleet Command. "Orbital Station 7, the Admiral said. "Report." Harris opened his mouth. She met his gaze, not challenging, not dismissive, just present. He closed it again. She stepped forward. "This is the acting authority on Station 7, she said evenly. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. No casualties. Significant system loss but stability restored. The Admiral's eyes sharpened. Acting authority. Yes, sir. A pause. The Admiral glanced down briefly, reading data, cross-referencing logs already streaming in. When he looked up again, his expression had changed. Your methods were unconventional, he said. They were necessary. Another pause, longer this time. Harris felt something cold settle in his stomach. The logs wouldn't be kind. They never were. Code didn't care about intent or rank. The Admiral folded his hands. Commander Harris, he said, finally addressing him, do you confirm this report? Harris swallowed. He could lie, frame it differently. Claim shared decision-making, minimize her role. He thought of the moment the system froze, of the clarity in her voice when everything else had collapsed. Yes, sir, he said, her report is accurate. The words tasted like surrender. The Admiral nodded slowly, understood. Silence filled the command center again, but this one was heavier, anticipatory. Commander Harris, the Admiral continued, preliminary review indicates your initial response escalated the incursion. Harris's shoulders tightened. You will remain available for inquiry. Yes, sir. The Admiral's gaze shifted back to her. And you, he said, your signature is familiar. Her jaw tightened just slightly. You trained under someone, the Admiral continued. Someone who understood systems the way others understand terrain. She felt the memory surface like a scar pulled open by cold. Yes, sir. The old architect, the Admiral said quietly. She nodded. I thought so. The lieutenant watched her carefully now. He saw something flicker behind her calm, a grief that had learned to live quietly. The Admiral leaned back. He warned us once, he said. We didn't listen. Neither of them spoke. Where is he now? The Admiral asked, though they both knew the answer. She swallowed. Gone, she said, because no one wanted to hear a quiet voice. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his gaze was steady. For the record, he said, Commander Harris questioned your authority prior to the incident. He demanded your rank. A ripple passed through the room. The lieutenant felt his heart kick harder. The Admiral continued, I would like that question answered, officially. Every eye turned toward her. Harris looked at her too, really looked this time, not as an anomaly, not as an irritation, as a force he'd failed to recognize. She took a slow breath. Not because she was nervous. Because this moment mattered. My rank, she said, is situational. The Admiral's eyebrow lifted slightly. In scenarios involving system-wide existential threats, she continued, authority is reassigned based on operational scope. She paused. In this context, she said, meeting the camera's gaze, my designated rank was 4-star general. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was recalibration. Harris felt the world tilt beneath his feet, not dramatically, quietly, like realizing gravity had been optional all along. The Admiral nodded once, respect undeniable. Authority confirmed, he said. Station 7 remains under your control until relief arrives. Yes, sir. The channel closed. No one spoke. The lieutenant became aware of his own breathing again, of the hum beneath the floor, of the fact that he had just watched power change hands without a single raised voice. Harris stepped back. Not because he was told to. Because he understood. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her attention was already back on the systems, on the small instabilities still whispering for correction. She worked for another hour, quietly, precisely, fixing things no one else could see yet. When she finally stepped away, it wasn't with relief. It was with resolve. The lieutenant watched her walk toward the exit, jacket over her arm, posture unremarkable. and he realized something that would stay with him for the rest of his career. The most dangerous people didn't announce themselves. They didn't need to. They waited. And when the moment came, they acted. Why did she hesitate at the doorway when no one was watching? The corridor outside the command center was dimmer than she expected. Emergency lighting still lingered in the seams, casting long amber lines across the floor. The noise behind her, voices, systems, motion, faded as the doors slid shut. For the first time since the alarms began, she was alone. She stopped, not because she was tired, because the silence finally had room to speak. Her hand rested against the cool metal wall. The station vibrated softly now, a wounded thing breathing through recovery. She closed her eyes and let the tension drain in controlled increments, like pressure bleeding from a valve. This was always the dangerous moment. After action, after validation, after survival. This was when memory came for her. She saw another corridor years ago, narrower, darker. The lights had failed there too. She remembered running, not toward danger, but away from the consequences of not being heard soon enough. She remembered the weightlessness that followed, the way bodies moved when the rules of inside and outside no longer applied. A hand trembled. She curled it into a fist. Not now. She straightened and began walking. Every step felt heavier than the last, though nothing was physically wrong. The station was stable. The crisis had passed. Fleet Command had acknowledged her authority. By any measurable standard, this should have been victory. It was, because victory implied an ending. And she knew better. She reached the observation deck overlooking the reactor housing, what remained of it. The primary control module was gone, torn free and drifting somewhere in the black. Engineers moved below, coordinated and careful, their movements precise in a way they hadn't been before. They'd changed. She had seen it in the command center too. Fewer sharp gestures, less noise. People spoke when they had something to say, not when they wanted to be heard. That was the part that stayed with her. Not the authority. The correction. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. "General," a voice said quietly. It was Harris. Not Colonel. Not Commander. Just a man now. She waited until he stood beside her before speaking. "You don't have to call me that." He gave a short, humorless breath. "Feels wrong not to." They watched the engineers work in silence for a moment. "I reviewed the logs," he said finally, "more closely." She nodded. She'd expected that. "I escalated," he continued. "I followed protocol instead of context." "Yes," she said. "No accusation, no comfort. Just fact." "I almost got everyone killed," he said. She turned then, meeting his eyes. "Almost," she agreed. He flinched, not from cruelty, but from the precision of her words. "Why didn't you say who you were?" he asked. "At the start, in the briefing room." She considered the question. "Because it wouldn't have helped," she said. "You would have listened to the rank, not the data." He swallowed. "And that matters." "It does," she said, "because one day the rank won't be there, and the data still will." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. "I didn't see you," he admitted. "No," she said, "you saw what you expected." The words weren't harsh. They didn't need to be. He looked away, jaw tight. "I've built my career on decisiveness," he said, "on being the loudest voice when things go wrong." She turned back to the viewport. "That works," she said, "until it doesn't." Another silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, reflective. "What happens to me now?" he asked. "That's not my decision," she replied. "But whatever happens, learn from it." He let out a breath that sounded like something giving way. "I will," he said. When he left, his steps were slower than when he'd arrived. She stayed. Hours passed. The station settled into a new rhythm. Temporary power stabilized. Backup systems synchronized. The fear that had sharpened everyone's movements dulled into focus, then into routine. She monitored it all from a quiet console in an auxiliary control room. No one questioned her presence now. They brought her updates without being asked, deferred when she spoke, adjusted without resentment. Respect, she had learned, felt different from obedience. Respect stayed. At some point, someone placed a mug of coffee beside her terminal. She didn't see who. The steam curled upward, warm and real. She wrapped her hands around it and paused. The tremor was gone. She drank. Fleet Command sent updates in intervals. Logistical coordination, Relief Commander ETA, recovery protocols. She answered succinctly, precisely. She didn't embellish. The facts were enough. Late into the station's artificial night cycle, she stood again and returned to the command center. It looked smaller now. Not physically. Emotionally. The chairs were the same, the displays unchanged, but the space no longer felt like a stage, it felt like a workspace. The lieutenant noticed her immediately. He straightened, then stopped himself, unsure. She gave him a brief nod. "Status?" she asked. "Reboot sequence holding," he said. "No residual anomalies." "Good." He hesitated. "Yes." He swallowed. "I just wanted to say thank you." She studied him for a moment. "For what?" she asked. "For trusting us," he said, "even when we didn't deserve it." She considered that. "Trust isn't a reward," she said. "It's a tool." He nodded, filing that away like something precious. When the relief commander arrived, it wasn't dramatic. No formal assembly. No speech. Just a quiet docking, a respectful exchange of credentials, and a man who had heard the story secondhand trying not to stare. He met her in the corridor, outside the command center. "General," he said, offering a careful nod. "Captain Reyes, I'll be assuming command." She handed him a data chip. "Full report," she said. "Technical breakdowns, behavioral analysis, recommended countermeasures." He took it like it weighed more than it should. "I won't pretend I understand all of it," he said. "You don't have to," she replied. "Just listen to the people who do." He smiled faintly. "I intend to." They stood there for a moment, two figures passing responsibility without ceremony. "That thing we faced," he said quietly, "do you think it was testing us?" She thought of the patterns, the patience, the way it had learned. "Yes," she said, "and we passed." "Barely," he said. "That's usually how it works." He hesitated, then asked, "Will we see you again?" She shook her head. "There are other stations," she said, "other patterns." He nodded, understanding more than he could articulate. She left the station aboard a small courier vessel. No escort, no announcement. As the docking clamps released, she stood at the viewport and watched the structure recede. Whole again, scarred but wiser. She allowed herself one small breath of satisfaction. Not pride. Closure. Then she turned her gaze forward, toward the quiet dark where threats didn't announce themselves with alarms or fleets. They whispered. And she listened. Because she had learned long ago that strength didn't always speak first. Sometimes it waited patiently until the moment demanded truth. And when it finally spoke, the room changed forever. Why did the silence of open space feel heavier than the chaos she had left behind? The courier ship detached without ceremony. No salutes, no cameras, just a low vibration as magnetic clamps released and the station drifted away, shrinking into a lattice of lights against the dark. She stood at the viewport longer than necessary, watching until distance turned structure into memory. Only then did she sit. The ship was small, purpose-built, no wasted space, no unnecessary noise. The hum of its systems was clean, efficient, almost comforting. She set her jacket on the seat beside her and rested her hands on her knees. That was when the fatigue finally arrived. Not the kind that made muscles ache. The deeper kind. The weight that came from holding everything together long enough for others to breathe again. Her shoulders slumped by a fraction. Her eyes closed. She saw the command center again. Harris's face when the log spoke. The lieutenant's expression when authority shifted without a word. The way the crew had changed, not instantly but permanently. That was the part she carried with her. Not victories. Corrections. The ship's comm panel chimed softly. She opened her eyes. Identify, she said. Fleet Command Relay, came the automated response. Priority secure. She didn't move immediately. She knew what it would be. She always did. Patch through, she said. The image resolved slowly. Admiral Kincaid again, not in formal dress this time. No audience, just a man in a quiet room, the weight of command resting visibly on him. You left quickly, he said. Yes, sir. I would have preferred a debrief in person. You have the data, she replied. That's what matters. He studied her for a long moment. You never stay, he said. No, she agreed. Why? She considered the question, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the truth deserved precision. Because if I stay, she said, they start listening to me instead of each other. The admiral leaned back slightly. You don't believe in command, he said. I believe in responsibility, she corrected. Command is temporary, responsibility is. A faint smile touched his mouth. It didn't reach his eyes. You sound like him, he said. She felt it then, the old ache, dull, familiar. He said something similar the day he died, the admiral continued quietly, right before the board overruled him. Her jaw tightened. They always do, she said, until it's too late. The admiral exhaled slowly. You saved that station. So did the crew, she replied, once they stopped performing. Another pause. There are others like that system, he said. We're seeing patterns. I know. You always do. He studied her again, then asked, how long can you keep doing this? She looked away from the screen, back toward the endless black beyond the viewport. I don't know, she said honestly, but not doing it costs more. The admiral nodded once. We'll call when we need you. You always do, she said. The channel closed. The ship adjusted course. She didn't check the destination. She didn't need to. It was never a place. It was always a problem. Hours passed. She moved through the ship with quiet efficiency, ran diagnostics, reviewed logs, annotated patterns others might miss. Her mind never truly rested. It shifted modes, from crisis to analysis, from reaction to anticipation. That was her gift. And her burden. She paused at a console displaying long-range network traffic, the background noise of the fleet, thousands of signals layered over one another, most benign, some not. Her fingers hovered, then stopped. There it was. A familiar harmonic buried deep in the static, almost imperceptible, almost elegant. She felt the old tension return, not fear but recognition. You're not done, she thought. She flagged the signal, isolating it without alerting the broader system, watched how it behaved when observed. It adapted. Slowly, carefully. A smile touched her lips, not satisfaction. Respect. You learned, she murmured. The ship's internal clock ticked forward. She remembered the first time she'd noticed a pattern like this. Years ago, a junior analyst then, sitting 3 seats back in a briefing room while louder voices filled the air. She, spoken once, been ignored. She, spoken again, been dismissed. The third time the system had failed, lives lost, careers reshuffled, apologies issued too late to matter. That was when she'd stopped raising her voice. She learned to wait, to watch, to act only when action became unavoidable. People called it patience. It was. It was discipline forged by consequence. The ship's alert chimed again, this one softer, a message request, low priority. She opened it. The lieutenant from the station, a private channel, unofficial. She hesitated, then accepted. "General," he said, visibly unsure. "I wasn't sure if I should." "You're fine," she said. "What is it?" He swallowed. "I just wanted to tell you things are different here." She waited. "We've changed how we brief," he continued. "How we listen. People question assumptions now, even the loud ones." She closed her eyes briefly. "Good," she said. "I keep thinking about what you said," he added, "about trust being a tool. And I think I understand it now," he said. "It's heavier than authority, but it holds more." She opened her eyes. "Yes," she said, "it does." He hesitated again. "Will you come back?" She didn't answer immediately. "Not to that station," she said finally, "but you won't need me to." He nodded, even though she hadn't said anything comforting. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not needing us to remember your rank," he replied. The channel closed. She sat in silence afterward, letting the words settle. Not needing us to remember. That mattered. The ship drifted through a field of distant stars, cold, constant, indifferent. She thought of Harris, of the look on his face when certainty collapsed, of the moment he chose truth over pride. That mattered too. Redemption didn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looked like learning. The signal she'd isolated pulsed again, fainter this time, smarter. She leaned forward. "Show me what you're hiding," she whispered. Her fingers moved. Somewhere in the vast machinery of the fleet, something listened back. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something unfamiliar rise alongside the tension. Not dread. Anticipation. Because she knew now, without doubt, that the galaxy's greatest threats weren't the ones that announced themselves with force. They were the ones that waited. Just like her. And when the moment came, they would test not her rank, but her resolve. Why did she slow her hand when the pattern finally revealed itself? The signal didn't surge. It didn't flare or threaten. It simply settled, as if it had decided there was no longer any reason to hide. She stared at the console, at the clean mathematical elegance unfolding line by line. It wasn't hostile in the way most threats were. No countdown. No intrusion attempt. Just a quiet declaration of presence, embedded deep in the fleet's background noise. A question without words. Her breath caught, not in fear but in recognition. This wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. She leaned back in the pilot's chair, the courier ship gliding smoothly through the dark. Outside the viewport, stars slid past like distant witnesses. Inside, the ship felt impossibly small for the weight of what she was seeing. Someone had learned. Not just from failure, but from restraint. She replayed the signal's behavior from the beginning. How it observed without interfering. How it adapted only when watched. How it avoided confrontation entirely. This wasn't a predator crashing through defenses. This was a mind testing boundaries. Carefully. Respectfully. Her fingers hovered above the controls, unmoving. Years ago, she would have acted immediately, flagged it, escalated it, summoned fleet command into another room full of sharp voices and louder assumptions. Years ago, that instinct had cost lives. She exhaled slowly. Not yet. She opened a private workspace, isolating the signal completely. No alerts, no traces, just her and the pattern. She fed it fragments of data controlled, meaningless on their own. She watched how it responded. It didn't take the bait. Instead, it mirrored her restraint. A chill moved through her chest. "You're not here to break us," she murmured. "You're here to understand us." The realization didn't frighten her. It sobered her. Because understanding was always the more dangerous weapon. Hours passed without her noticing. The ship's internal clock ticked forward, marking time that felt irrelevant. She annotated behaviors, logged deviations, constructed theoretical frameworks, not for a report, for herself. This wasn't something she would hand over easily. Trust, she knew, was fragile. And this, whatever it was testing whether humanity deserved it. The memory returned unbidden. The old architect standing beside her at a flickering console, eyes bright not with certainty, but curiosity. "They think war is about strength," he'd said once. "It's not. It's about restraint, about knowing when not to pull the trigger." She hadn't understood then. She did now. The signal shifted again, subtle, almost shy. A recursive loop tightened, then loosened, like a hand offered and withdrawn. She smiled faintly. "Careful," she said softly. "That's how you get noticed." She sent a response. Not a command. Not a question. A boundary. The signal paused. Then adjusted. Acceptance. Her shoulders sagged, tension easing in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not relief, something quieter, something like trust forming in real time. The ship chimed. Another message request. She almost ignored it. Almost. "Accept," she said. Fleet command again, but not the admiral this time. A junior intelligence officer, eyes wide, posture too rigid. "General," he said quickly, "we're detecting anomalous background traffic across multiple sectors. Nothing aggressive, but—" "I know," she said. He blinked. "You know." "Yes." "Should we escalate?" She considered the question carefully. "Not the politics, the consequences." "No," she said, "not yet." There was hesitation on the other end, fear barely masked. "With respect, ma'am." "This isn't a threat," she said gently. "It's a test." "A test of what?" She looked back at the console, at the signal patiently waiting. "Of whether we only listen when something screams." Silence. Then quietly, "Understood." The channel closed. She knew there would be questions later, resistance, doubt, maybe even consequences, but she also knew this moment couldn't be rushed. Some truths only emerged when given space. The courier ship adjusted course again, responding to an automated directive she hadn't consciously registered. She let it. Destination didn't matter. What mattered was timing. She stayed awake through the artificial night cycle, monitoring, responding, withholding. The signal never pushed, never demanded. It learned her rhythm and matched it. By the time the ship's lights brightened to simulate morning, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Hope. Not naive hope, not optimism. The hard-earned kind. Days later, when she finally transmitted a condensed report to Fleet Command, it wasn't filled with warnings or recommendations for force. It was measured, careful, incomplete by design. Some things couldn't be solved by committees. Some things required listening. When the Admiral responded, his message was brief. "I trust your judgment." She read it twice. Trust. She shut down the console and stood stretching stiff muscles. The ship hummed around her, steady and reliable. Outside, the stars didn't change. They never did. She thought of the station again, of the crew learning to speak less and hear more, of Harris facing the weight of his decisions without excuses, of the lieutenant carrying lessons forward without needing her to stay. This, she realized, was the real work. Not winning. Correcting. She returned to the viewport one last time before initiating the next jump. Reflection stared back at her in the glass. A woman without insignia, without ceremony, without the need to be recognized. She was tired, but she was steady. Somewhere out there patterns were forming, threats evolving, minds watching. Let them. She would be watching too. Because strength, she had learned, wasn't in how loudly you could demand obedience or how quickly you could pull rank. It was in the discipline to wait, in the courage to listen, and in the wisdom to act only when silence had revealed the truth. Sometimes authority doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It doesn't even stay. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts and leaves the world quieter, wiser, and just a little more alive than it found it.